Okay, let's do some more JavaScript. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about scope of variables, and we're going to talk about extending the DOM, the document that our HTML page is displaying. So in the last lesson, we were able to retrieve things from DOM elements, read text boxes and things like that, and then insert that content into other elements. But today we're actually going to grow the DOM by actually inserting new elements and extending the existing structure. And we're going to talk about scoping of variables and in JavaScript and how we can begin to do some more complex stuff. Okay, so first thing, let's get our HTML page set up. We'll just use the shortcut. We're going to do a BMI, um, some BMI calculations, and we're just going to build a table of BMI calculations. Okay, so let's start by just putting a little bit of stuff here in the HTML. We're going to do an H1. Okay, we're going to do a BMI log, and then we're going to say we're going to have a div where we're going to put some inputs. I'm going to do an input of a date. It's going to be type equals date. And we're going to give this a name because we're going to want to read from this. We're going to give it a name. Date input. And then I'm going to do a second input, and it's going to be type equals. It's just going to be a type equals text. And this is going to be ID equals height. In order to do BMI, we need a height and a weight calculation. And then we're going to do another one, type equals text. And we're going to do weight. Okay, height and weight is what we need. Okay, so we have that. Then we're going to do a little line break, and then we're going to put a button. And the button is going to say record BMI. And the button is going to have an on-click event. But we'll come back and do that in a minute. So now we see we've got three text boxes. We've got a button. So we're going to type stuff into the text box, and then we're going to record that in a new element on the screen. We're actually going to put a table on the screen, and then we are going, as we type things into the BMI, we're just going to add rows to the table. So let's go ahead and code up the table. Now before we do that, you might be wondering, we did a lot of work on forms, and why aren't we using a form here? The simple answer is because a form has some built-in functionality to it. When you go to submit a form, the that actually causes the browser to do a redirect or to try to do a redirect. So putting these elements, inputs, and buttons outside the form, if we're just working just on the screen, just makes more sense than using a form. You can use a form here, but if you do that, whenever you click the submit button, you would have to disable the form activity and using JavaScript, which is not complicated, but it's just this is less work. So let's see. So we're going to need a table. Let's see. I've named these fields inconsistently. So let's go ahead and type that height input and weight input. Okay, so now let's put it in a little table. Let's do another div, and then let's put a table in there. And then I'm going to put a header. And in my header, I'm going to put a row. I'm going to put a row. And in my rows, I'm going to do 3 columns. One's going to be date. One's going to be um, uh, it's going to be the calculated BMI, and then the next one is going to be the range. BMIs have a range of underweight, normal weight, and overweight, and obese. I don't know. We'll look the ranges up in a minute. And so then so we have the head, and I'm going to come in. I'm going to put in the body. Okay, and then I'm going to come in and put in the foot. Okay, and in the foot, I'm going to do um, three. I'm going to do 3 elements because I'm going to have one. Well, the first one is going to be, oops, I need a row. In the row, I'm going to put um, I'm going to put a totals here, and we're going to count let's see, we're going to count the number of entries, and we're just going to, I don't know, give an average BMI, I guess. So let's just do average here. I don't know that average BMI is a valid rating, but that's not really our point here. We're trying to experiment with JavaScript. And then I'm just going to have 3 fields here, which will be, this is going to be ID total. This will be count. we'll call it count. And then this one, the third one will be the average. And we'll just call that average. Okay. All right. So there we go. We've got a little bit of stuff on our screen. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like in HTML. I'm just going to go ahead um, and copy the path here and then insert it into my browser that I already have open. So this is what it looks like. So now it doesn't do anything, but we've got some text boxes, right? So okay, this is our table. You can't really see it because there don't have any borders or anything around it. So we're going to want to style this up, and we're going to want to do the JavaScript. But let's do the JavaScript first, and then we'll come back and do the style. We've already got a little bit of experience kind of styling this. This is not unlike what we did last week. With the basic addition and such. So, but we'll style it up later after we do the JavaScript. Okay, so let's do a little bit of JavaScript here. So I've already got a script. We need to go ahead and include the script. So in order to include the script, I need to do a script tag here. The script tag is going to say source equals, and it's going to be JS/script, and I'm getting a little type ahead. Okay, and then we can go ahead and put that script in. Let's just say alert hello. So that way we just know that the script is wired. Okay, there's our script. Page loads. Okay, so now we know our script is wired into our HTML. Now, what I want to be able to do is when I click the button, when I click this button right here, I want to be able to read the values from date, height, and weight. I'm going to calculate a BMI, and then I'm going to write some values into the body tag here. Notice I don't have anything in the body. So when I actually go to write that, I'm actually going to create a table row using JavaScript and insert it into the body. Okay. So we're going to insert something in there. Right now, this body has a value called inner HTML, and we're just going to write to that. We're going to append to it using some JavaScript. So first things first, let's go ahead and talk through the JavaScript. So a couple of things I want to be able to do is I'm going to need a function to when I click the button. So I need to add an event here. Remember, all the JavaScript functions run on events. So I need to go ahead and add an event here called onClick, and we're just going to call it record BMI. Okay, and there are no parameters there. Okay, now remember that record BMI. This is what I'm naming here is a JavaScript function, so it's going to be lower camel case. It's going to start with a lowercase letter, and then the subsequent words are going to be uppercase. In this case, you could argue that BMI, standing for 3 words, should be all uppercase. I'm not going to get hung up on that. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and put that into our JavaScript. I'm going to write a function here in JavaScript. Function record BMI. And I open and close with the curly braces. Now we can just go ahead and do an alert here just to make sure that we're firing that off right. So when I save that and go back to my HTML, refresh this page, when I click this button, I should get an alert. Click the button, get the alert. Okay, so my JavaScript is wired up properly. So now what I want to do in my JavaScript is I want to retrieve the 3 fields. So I want to get the date value, I want to get the height and the weight. So let's go ahead and look for that. So let's say let date equals, I'm going to now want to reach into the document. And remember, we do that by using the document object, which is intrinsic to our JavaScript because it's running in the browser, or implicit to the JavaScript because it's running in the browser. So I can just define that. It's called document. The document is of course, the whole HTML document that's sitting in the browser. So it is so with that, I can ask for certain elements. So I can say get element by ID. Remember, I've named them all with an ID field because I want to be able to reach into them and get the value. So the first one is date input. And so to do that, I just put in the parameter date input. That's the argument, actually. And then it's going to be the value because it's an input. Okay. So my iPad is trying to be a little too helpful there. The value of the text box, once I get this element, document.get element by ID date input, this statement returns a reference to the text box. Now that text box is an object and it has properties and methods and things that I can do on it. In this case, what I want is to retrieve the value. So I'm just reading the property value right there saying property. So let's go ahead and just alert that just to make sure that just so we can kind of see how it works. Okay, so if I come back and refresh this, if I click that, I don't get anything because the date box is empty. I got an alert, but there was no alerted data. So if I come back in and say put something in here, then when I click that, I get a date. That's the value of the text box. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get the others. Let weight equals document dot get element by ID, weight input dot value. And then let's do the height document dot get element by ID, height input. Okay. Dot value. Okay, so now I have those three things. So now what I want to do is I want to do some calculations on them. Okay. Um, so what I can do is I want to do a calculation on the height and the weight in order to calculate the BMI. And I'm going to do that using a function. Okay. I'm just going to say let BMI equals get BMI, and I'm going to send it two arguments, the weight and the height. Okay, separated by a comma. Now these are parameters. So I'm writing another function here, but notice in this case, I've sent parameters to the function. These are arguments. I send arguments, I receive parameters. So the getBMI method, when I define it, is going to need to receive two parameters. So let's go ahead and define that. Function getBMI, and it takes two parameters, weight and height. It's really important that you put these in the right order because I passed them in weight and height. I need to receive them in weight and height and vice versa. So you always have to make sure that you are passing these functions back and passing the arguments in the same order that they're defined as parameters. Then we do a calculation. Now the BMI, I don't remember what the BMI formula is, so let's look it up real quick. Let's see it. So height times weight is a square of something. What is BMI formula? It's going to be weight in kilograms. Here's one, weight in pounds. Weight in pounds times, let's just copy that. So weight in pounds times, so it's going to be this. So it's this weight in pounds divided by height in inches uh, squared times 703. Okay, so that's going to be let BMI equals weight divided by, now I'm going to do some math here. This is divided by height squared times 703. So I need to make sure I have my order of operations correct here. So I'm going to want to put the right-hand side of the division element here, and I'm going to do height times height. Uh, height times height. And then times 703. Okay. There is a shortcut for doing exponents here, JavaScript math.pow, but I'm just going to use the height times height because it's just obvious and easy. And then let's go ahead and alert the BMI here just so that we can get a look at that. Okay. So now I need to remember now that height is going to be in inches and weight is going to be in pounds. So I'm going to need to add that to my form when we start styling it up. So let's go ahead and save this, refresh this page. Now if I put in, let's see, is this height or weight? I don't remember. Let's see, height was first and then weight. So this is height. So if I put in 72 inches, 185 pounds, then I get something wrong. So that BMI is incorrect because that should be something else. So it should be something like 18 or 25 or something like that. So that's height and weight. Height is first, weight is second. Script, get the weight, get the height, get the weight, get the height. weight divided by height times 703. Was that my weight in pounds? Height times 703. Okay, so let's see. Let's see, this does not have the order of operations in it. So this must be this, that I actually need weight divided by height times 703. So I actually want this, I think. Let's see if that's correct. All right. Should have looked this up before I started the video. Okay, let's see if that works. 72 inches, 185 pounds, 25.08. Okay, so that's what it should be. So 25, BMI generally runs like from 18 to 35 or something like that, depending if you're thin or larger. So it's important to note that the BMI value itself is not particularly meaningful. It's a very average rating, but I'll let you read about what it means. The okay, so now we've got that right. So let's go back and review. What happened here is I misread this value. So this says weight in pounds divided by height squared times 703. And so I misinterpreted this that this was the full second part of the divide statement, but it's not. It's actually three weight divided by times. So the order of operations here is the standard order of operations is what we need. Okay, so all right. Um, and we could ask, let's see, we could come back here and ask what is BMI for 72 inches and 185 pounds? And we'll get a calculation here. It'll say, um, does it give us the answer? 25.1 is what it says. And then here's the healthy weights. We're gonna actually need this later, so I'm gonna copy that and paste that in here. I'm just gonna paste it in here and then I'm gonna comment it out. So we're just gonna have that as a reference because we're gonna want that later. But see, this says 25.1 is the answer. And so if we come back here and we run our calculator again, and we say 72 inches and 185 pounds, 25.08. Okay, so we'll round that in a minute. So that's good. So 25.1. Okay, so we know that our BMI is correct. Okay. So now let's go ahead and style this up a little bit because I'm going to get confused and forget which one is weight and height. So um, let's go ahead and just style this page. I'm just going to move it to the middle. I kind of like things in the middle of the screen as opposed to on one side. So I'm just going to take this whole block, just kind of move it to the middle. I'm going to put a little bit of a border around the table just so we can see it. I'm going to make things about this. I'm going to make things similar sizes and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and do some CSS. So I've got my CSS here. First thing we need to do is we need to wire it um, into the HTML. We're going to use a link. And then this is going to be source instead of, no, this is href instead of source, and it's going to be CSS/style. Okay. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to make the body, I'm just going to make it so that it doesn't take up the whole width of the screen. Um, um, and then center it all. Um, and then we'll go from there. Um, so let's just do a text align on the body as we'll do a body at say 60%, and then we'll do a text align. We'll do an auto margin on that, which will put it all in the middle, and then we'll text align center on some of the stuff. So let's see what that looks like, one step at a time. Okay, first thing is we're going to go on the body, and we're going to say um, width is 60%, and margin is auto. Now, one trick that we sometimes do is we can put a border around all the elements so that we can see where there are. I'm not going to do that right at the moment just because I've got a little bit of feel for where these things are. There's not a lot going on here. So now this is 60%. If we come in and we look at our inspector, we can hover on the body and we can see if I make this bigger a little bit, then you'll be able to see when I come in on the body, I go to compute it, I can see that the margin is on the sides, automatically on the sides. I'm centered, and so you can kind of see where the body is and where the content is. So So now I'm just going to start centering things. So let's just center the H2. Let's just center the whole thing. So let's just do a text align center on the body. And then we can, so that's going to move it all in the middle. The table, we'll have to center that separately. And then, because the table is in the div there. So the div is taking up the div is taking up, and the table is inside a div, and the div is centered, but the table itself is not centered within the div. So we'll come back and deal with that. All right, let's label these buttons, or let's label these boxes a little bit, and let's make them all the same size, make them a little bigger. So first things first, let's put some labels in on those boxes. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to say label, um, and it's going to be date of measurement. And I'm going to come in here and say label. This is going to be height in inches. I have another label here. This will be weight in pounds. Okay, so there's all those. Now let's go ahead and make let's make the text a little bigger. So on all of these, I misspelled measurement. So let's go ahead and make the text a little bigger on all these labels and on the input boxes as well. So first things first, come to the script, and let's say I only want to make the labels. I could target these, specific labels, and because I don't want to make every label on the page bigger, but in this case I do. So I'm just gonna use the label tag because I don't really need to to target them specifically. So I'm just gonna say for all the labels, make the font size. Let's just make it 18 pixels, and let's go ahead and let's change the font family just to play around with stuff. And I'm just going to do the Courier New. And then let's go ahead and make those bold. Font weight. So I've got ranges from 100 to 900, or I can just say bold or bolder. So I'm just going to use the bold. Okay, so now we're bigger. Okay, we may run out of space here because we've got too much label going on. So we'll come back and solve that in a minute. Let's go ahead and make the inputs. Let's go ahead and make the inputs larger. So the inputs, I want to make them a little beefier. I want to give them a little padding around the input, because if I come in here and I type and I'm typing letters, this is just not, it's just too close together, right? So I just want to make the box a little bigger. So I'm going to do that by adding padding on the inside of the input. Okay. So I come in here and on the style, I can just play with that and say padding. If I do padding on the inside and I do 5 pixels, whoops, 5 pixels, we see that it gets bigger. So 5 looks about right. 7 would work. 5, 7. We don't need to get too tied up about it. Padding, but remember, padding is inside the element. Margin is outside the element. So by putting padding of 7 pixels in here, then what I'm doing is I'm increasing the distance between the contents of the text box and the border of the text box. And let's go ahead and up the border. So let's say the border, let's make it 3 pixels, solid black. Save that, refresh. Okay, that's getting bigger. Okay. All right, so now we're not going to put a lot of data in here. So like, 72 inches, most people are less than 1,000 pounds, right? They're in a couple, 100, 200 pounds. And so there's really only going to be um, three numbers in here and 2 numbers in here. So we can make these text boxes smaller. Okay. So to do that, we just want to target the width of the text box, but we don't want to make this one smaller. We want to leave the date one smaller, or we want to leave the date one as is. So let's play with that so I can explain exactly what I'm seeing here. So if I come in and I just say for the inputs, if I say the width, and I want to make them 15 pixels. Okay. So that makes them all small. Okay. So I don't want this date box to be small. I only want the text boxes to be small. So here I can come in and I can actually increase the specificity of my selector. by giving it an attribute selector. So remember, in other places we've done like a period where we do a class name or something like that, but I can also select based on the attributes. So remember, I've got the attribute here of type text and type date. So I can come in here and I can select using this square brackets, type equals text. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that just for the width. So I want all the inputs to have the padding. So I can come in here and say input type equals text, and then open my selectors, and I'm just going to move the width down here. Okay, so now it's going to make my text boxes small, but it's going to leave the date box at the same size. Okay, so let's refresh that. See, so now my date box is back to its normal size. Okay, and then these are there, but these are really kind of too small, so they're not showing all that. So let's make them. Let's go ahead and say we can play around with what the width should be. I'm just pressing the up arrow button here to kind of get some space. So 35 should do it. Okay, so let's do 35, and let's go ahead and reduce this. Let's just call this date. I don't like these are all so close together. So we'll just space them out a little bit. Maybe what we'll do is we'll put the date on its own line. We'll put height and weight underneath, and we're just going to add a little space right here, kind of in between the end of the label and the boxes. Okay, so let's make that. I think we said 35 was a good number. Let's go ahead and put. I could just put these. I could use multiple embedded divs here, but this is a very simple form. So I'm just using a line break here, which is going to put a line in between the two labels. Okay. All right. Let's see. 35 is still not enough there. Let's inspect that. Oh, I forgot to save it. Is that what happened? Yes. Okay, I forgot to save it. 35. Okay, so now they're bigger. All right, that's not terrible. It's not great. It's not terrible. So then let's go ahead and put in some additional space here. I've got a colon here that I missed on the other two, so I'll add that. And then I'm just going to add a little right-hand margin to each of these labels so that it spaces out put some distance in between the label and the text box. Okay, so on the label, I'm just going to do some margin on the right. Margin dash right, and I'm just going to say, just give it 10 pixels, we'll just fool around with that. And then I'm going to come in and put in the colons here, save all that, refresh. Okay, I need to probably put in a little space here as well. So let me just put in on the right-hand side of this particular text box, let me just put some margin in here. So that it's there. Actually, why don't I just put these all in a separate line? Then let's just do that. Let's see what that looks like if I already do that. So if I just put each text box on its own line. All right, that's fair. Okay, and so then what we can do is we can line these up. We need to put some space in between them, top to bottom. So what I can do is on each of the inputs, I can just put some top margin, and then that'll do that. So margin on the top. And let's just do 20 pixels, and that'll spread them out a little bit. Okay, perfect. Okay, now let's make the button a little bigger. So on the button, we want to make it, let's just make it let's do the same thing. We'll make it a little beefier. So we'll increase the padding. We'll increase the font size of the content. We'll turn the button navy and put white text on it, just to make it stand out a little bit on the screen. So on the button, I could either style on the button, or I could style on the I could give it an ID and style, but there's only one button, so I'm just gonna style it using the button selector. So we're gonna make the background color navy. We're going to make the font color white. We're going to give it padding of let's see, how much did we do on the inputs? We did 7 pixels. Let's start at 7 and see what it looks like. Let's make the font size. Let's see, did we do 18? We did 18 on the labels. Let's make the font weight bold, and let's just leave it at whatever font it is. We don't have to change the font. Okay, that's okay. Let's make it a little wider so that there's some more space on the right and the left. So let's say what I can do there is I can say padding. I can use a shorthand for padding on the top and the bottom and the right and the left. So we're using two. I can either give padding in four elements, top, right, bottom, left, or I can give padding in one element, which applies to all of them, or I can give padding in two elements, which applies to the top and then the right and the left. So I can do here. So give me, it needs to be a little bigger, I think. So give me 10 pixels on the top and the bottom, and then give me 15 pixels on the right and the left. So now what we should see is that when I refresh this, it gets a little wider. Okay, let's go even more than that. Let's say 25 pixels. Okay, that's good. And let's put a little margin on the top there so that it separates. Let's see, we did 20 pixels on the top margin here, so let's just use the same. Okay, all right, that's good enough. This is not great web design, but we're just getting practice for how to change the way things look. Okay, so now let's look at this table. So the table is inside a div, and I want that table to be centered. So the table's inside this div. So let's just say, let's give the div an ID called results. And then let's style that by saying for um, any class that has a table in it, then oops, that's hashtag. Then let's go ahead and say text align center. Does that work? Did I do that right? No, I didn't do that right. That is the div. We just do the table. Actually, we just need to do the table. Nope, not the table. All right. Am I saving this? Div indeed. Okay, so let's look at this. So been doing it 30 years. I still get lost every now and then. So in the results, we want the table. Actually, I think we just want to text align center. We don't want to just align the results. That's what it is. We named it with ID, so we want the hashtag text align center right there. Still, it still didn't do it. Wow, we are not doing well here. Text align center, table. Oh, what we need is the margin. Ugh. We need margin auto on here, so we need that does it. Okay, so yeah, so what we need is we need on the results table, we need margin auto. So that'll actually put the table in the middle. Let's go ahead and put some borders on this. So we see that there's three columns, but you can't really see them. So let's go ahead and on that table, let's just say border. Um, let's just call it 1 pixel solid black. Okay, and so there we are. So then on each row, what we can do is let's target. So that's the border on the table itself. So what we also want to do is we want the right and the left to be auto margin, but we need some space in between the button and the table. So let's go ahead and we'll have the right and the left are auto margin, and let's do 20 pixels on the top and the bottom. So we spread that out a little bit. Let's go ahead and up the font size to 18 pixels. Did we do 18? Yeah, 18 pixels. Okay, and let's go ahead and do the font family as in that Courier font. Okay, now we're getting there. So now we want to make it wider. So let's make the whole thing, let's just make that table take up the entire width of its container. In this case, the width of the container is 60% because we did the body at 60%. So if we want this table just take up the whole width, then we can do that. That might be a little too big. We'll come back and figure that out. So here on the average, we're going to want to, this is going to be the footer, so we're going to want to bold that. You could bold that in a couple of ways. You could just use the TH tag instead of the TD tag, and then everything would by default be bold because that's the default styling of the TH tag, um, which would work. But let's go ahead and just do some do some formatting on the on that footer. So we can come in here and we can say for the results table, um, for the results T foot on the table row. Well, let's just do on that, and then we can say fonts weight bold. That should do it. Okay, so now it's going to be bold. We don't have anything in these other two columns yet. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and let's stop styling and let's actually insert some data into this table because we're going to want to finish styling that once we get into it. So the way that we want to work here, actually, let's finish the styling because then we won't get distracted in our JavaScript. So in order to style this, I'm just going to put some test data in here so that I can see what the table is going to look like. Because what we're going to do is we're going to type data in, and it's going to insert data into the row, into the table. Okay. But when the page starts, the table is going to be empty. So, but I want to be able to style it. So I'm just going to add some placeholder data in it that I'm going to delete later just so that I can work on the styling. And then we'll get the styling done, and then we'll spend more time on JavaScript. So let's look. Go back to HTML here. And what I really just need is I'm going to have a table row and it's going to have a table cell. First one is going to be dates. Let's just say 2025 01-01. There's going to be another one and another one. And this one's going to be like the BMI is going to be like 25.1 and it's going to be let's just call it what were the ratings, the rankings? Healthy weight, overweight, obese. So let's just call it uh, healthy weight. Okay. I'm just going to put 3 rows in here. We're going to delete these later, but um, overweight and obese. And I'm just trying to get some sample data in here. And then on my header, on my details here, we're going to have ID count. We're going to start with 0, and the average BMI is going to be 0.0. Okay. Okay, so now we can reload that. We've got a little bit of weight in here, got a little bit of content. So now what we can do is I misspelled that, but it doesn't matter because we're going to delete it. So what we can do is we can put some inner grid around this. So let's just put um, an all borders. So let's put borders around the whole table. Let's just kind of play with it in the inspector to see what it looks like. So if I come in here to the body, and on the body, if I just put in border equals uh, solid 1 pixel black. Okay, that's not what we want. We want it on the rows, not on the uh, on the table. So we want it on the body. So if I do it on the rows here, okay, still not getting what I want. Okay, now that's what we want. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just put it on each of the rows. So in our style, what we'll do here is on the results table body table row, we'll do border 1 pixel. Whoops, solid 1 pixel black. I think that's what we had. Save that, refresh. Nope, I'm just really not doing right here. It was on the cell, TD. There we go. Okay, so that's all right. So we've got a little bit of a gap there, which we can get rid of. Okay, so little gap. We've got, let's see if we can put a double line so that we have like the equal line so that we can show that this is the total. I think if we want to do that, what we could do is we could on the foot, let's try to say if we did a border on the top here as double, 2 pixels black, what does that look like on that footer? If we did it on the row, border top. Like I say, actually, we need to do it on each cell. That's right. We learned nothing from the last example. So here we go. Border, here we do a top border double, 1 pixel black. And we put that in. That's not showing because to have it double, it needs to be longer, more than 1 pixel. So it's actually 1 pixel is not enough for you to be able to see the doubling. So you need at least 3 or 4 pixels in there to be able to see that. So, all right. Oops, that's the, okay, so let's do that. That's not really coming out very well. All right, so let's see on the footer, TD. Let's go ahead and do the border top. We'll keep working on this. 3 pixels. Let's see, double, 3 pixels, black. Save that. Okay, that's not really getting there. We'll keep working on it. Let's see, what can we do? What can we do? Well, I think for now, let's just take out the inner borders. That's not really looking very good anyway. All right, so we can come in here to Visual Studio. Let's just take this out. We'll come back to that if we need to. All right, that's good enough. Let's make it narrower. So 100% is maybe too much there. Let's try to make that the whole table instead of making it 100%. Let's just try 500 pixels. What does that look like? So that's about right. So let's just call it 550 pixels. That's probably enough. Okay. So instead of 100%, we're going to make it 550 pixels. Okay. And I think we're back in business. Now, we could keep going on this, and if I were going to try to sell this and ask for somebody to pay me for doing this work, I might actually keep going on this. But the purpose of our example today is to learn JavaScript, not CSS. Okay, so we've spent enough time on this. Okay, so now what we want to do, let's go ahead and we know how it's going to style up. So let's go ahead and just get rid of our testing data here, and then let's work on the JavaScript. Okay, so come into HTML, and let's just delete those inner rows, refresh that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to enter data here. I want to click record BMI, and I want the data to be inserted into the table. Okay, so let's do that. Come into JavaScript. So we've done the calculation here where we've retrieved the values from the inputs, and we have calculated the BMI. So now let's go ahead and insert this into the table. So I'm going to put that into another function. I'm going to say insert into table, and I'm going to send the date, the BMI, and the range. Okay. And for the range, we're going to say let range equals get BMI range, and we're going to put an if statement in there. Okay, and we're going to send the BMI. So we're going to do that in both of those functions. For now, I need to, in order for this to run, I need to define both of these functions. So what I'm just going to do is for the get BMI range, I'm just going to say, I'm just going to define it, and I'm just going to have it return um, return just a value of pending. Okay. The return value here is when I call this, when I say let range equals get BMI range, then whatever it calculates, whatever is in the return statement is what is going to go in this variable. Okay. So I'm also going to need a return here. So return BMI. Okay. All right. So let's see, we've got an error there. Semicolon expected. Oh, I've left out the word function. Okay. So let me do that again in slow motion so you can see what happened here. When I type this in, see this little red squiggly underneath my curly brace? That means there's an error right there. I've made a mistake in the JavaScript somehow. So if I just put my cursor over it, it says semicolon expected. And sometimes it'll give me hints on how to fix it. But in this case, what's happened is I just forgot the keyword function when I was defining my value. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create the insert into table function. It takes three parameters, date, BMI, and the range. So now what we want to do here, it's spelled all right, is we want to say let HTML equals, and now we're actually going to create some HTML. So I'm going to create a table row, and inside the row, I'm going to put a table, a TD, and then this is going to be my date. Okay, because remember, I'm just filling in these three columns. And then that's going to be the end of the TD. And I'm going to build this in a couple of steps just so that I don't confuse myself. The next one is going to be the BMI. I'm kind of using placeholder data here. And then the last one is going to be the range. Now, this is obviously not what I want. Okay. And then, so once I have that built, then I actually can get a reference to the table body using the get element by ID and append this to the inner HTML. So now what I can say is I can say document dot get element by ID. And this is going to be I want it here. I want the footer. I want um, let's just name that. Um, we'll call it ID equals table body. And let's come back to the JavaScript and we're going to say table body. Then I want to say the inner HTML. Now, what I want to do here is I want to append to it. Now, what I'm doing here is concatenation. So there's a shorthand for concatenation called plus equals. This says take whatever's on the right side of this assignment statement and add to it whatever I put on the left. Okay, so this is basically appending the current contents of inner HTML. It's taking HTML and appending it to the current contents of the inner HTML of this element. So let's see what that does. So right now, if I just click that, um, I'm just getting basic data, but I'm getting the wrong data. It's in the wrong place. It should be in the table body, not in the footer. So let's see, I picked I put the ID on the wrong section. So let's just cut that out. It goes here on the body. Okay, so now when we insert that, see how it's inserting into the table body every time I click. Okay, now what I need to do is come back in and actually use valid data here. Okay, so let's instead of using the hard code values, let's actually insert our parameters. So we have three parameters, date, BMI, and range. So now I can just use some more concatenation here. Plus date. Okay, and then here for the BMI, I can say plus BMI. So now I'm actually appending, concatenating whatever's in the value of these BMI uh, date range variables in along with this static values of the table elements. Oops, I don't need to close that table row there. Okay. So now when we do this, let's go ahead and pick a date, 72, 185, record. Oops, got to refresh that first. Pick the range, 72, 185. Okay. All right, so this is good. So I got my data. I got this BMI. We're going to want to round that. Okay, so that should really just be 25.1. So we can round that. And then I'd actually need to implement the pending using an if statement. So now here on the BMI, let's go ahead and do the round. So the first thing, so in order to round, there is no round function built into JavaScript for rounding to decimal points. So what you have to do is you have to move the decimal point and round and then move the decimal point back. So it's a little kludgy, but here's how it works. BMI equals math.round. And what we want to round is BMI um, times 10. And then we want to round that and then want to divide that by 10. Okay. So that is how that works. I know it's a little counterintuitive, but that's how you do it. So let's go ahead and enter that again. 72 inches, 185, 25.1. Okay, so now let's implement the range. To implement the range, we want to use an if statement. So you can read about this in W3 Schools on the Odin project about using if statements. But an if statement is just a conditional. It takes it uses the keyword if. You then have a condition. If this condition is met, then you do something. Otherwise, you do something else. So let's go ahead and try to implement that. So in the BMI range, what we want to do is we want to say here, we're going to want to say if, and then we're going to put our condition in parentheses. And then the result, this is going to be the then statement. Okay. So we have if this condition equals true, okay, then do this. Then we can also put in else, do this. Okay, so now if this condition is true, I'm going to run this first block. If that condition is not true, I'm going to run the second block. Okay, I can also do this where I can say, I can do another if statement here. Okay, and then I can do this, and then I can have another else statement down here. Okay, so these things all work. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm getting some highlight here because the code is visual code is recognizing that I'm never going to execute these statements because this statement's always going to be true because I've just hard coded in. That's why it's kind of highlighted out here. I think the error is going to be unreachable code is the error that's going to show me. Yeah, unreachable code. It says that the way you've coded this will never run. So but that's okay because I'm gonna come in and tweak it. So what do I want to check here? So what I want to check is for these ranges. So if the BMI is greater than 30, then I want to return obese. So I want to come here. If BMI is greater than or equal to 30.0, then I want to return obese. Okay. Else, if the BMI is greater than or equal to 25.0, now this is really a range, right? So the greater than 25, less than 29.9. But I don't have to put in the less than here because I've already evaluated that on the first if statement. So if the BMI is more than 30, I'm never going to get to this point because it's already been handled. So because I'm going from the top down, checking for greater than, then I don't have to put a second bound on this. Okay. So just makes my if statement easier. Return, and that is going to be overweight. And then the last thing is else. This is just going to be if it's anything else, then it's going to be actually we have an underweight. So we have 18.5. So I'm going to do another if statement here. If BMI greater than or equal to 18.5, then return healthy weight. And then my last else statement here is going to be everything else. So in this case, if none of the other if statements are true, then this is going to be the one that I run. And this is going to be return um, underweight. Okay, let's see if my highlighting is off. I've got an error right here. See the red squiggle underneath my curly brace? And it says you're missing a parenthesis, and I left the parenthesis off this expression. Okay, this expression is called a Boolean expression. Boolean is a data type, kind of like string or number, but it only evaluates to true or to false. And so in this case, we created a Boolean expression, BMI greater than or equal to 30. That's either going to be true or false. That's either true or it's not true. And if it's true, we're going to return obese. If it's not true, then we're going to come down here and check this other value. Okay, let's see if that works. Put this in, 72, 185. Overweight, 25.1. Yep, that's right in there. And then come in here, let's 72 inches, say it's 180. That's going to give me healthy weight. If I'm coming in at 125, that's going to be underweight. If I come in at 250, then that's going to be obese. Okay. All right. So that's working. Okay. Now let's go ahead. Now we still have to do these things in the footer. So this is going to we want to increase the count here. Excuse me. So this should say 4 because there are 4 entries here. So every time we add a row, we want to increase this count here on the side. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to need to do is we're going to want to keep track of how many rows are in the table, how many rows we insert into the table. So knowing that it's 0 when we start, I just refresh the screen. Knowing that it's 0 rows when we begin, we start here at 0. So, but we need to create a variable in our JavaScript that will keep track of how many rows there are. Now we do that by creating a global variable. So when we've defined variables here inside a function, these variables are scoped just to this function. So I can only use this variable inside this function, or I can pass it as an argument to another function. But once this function ceases to run or it finishes its process, that the contents of that variable is gone forever. But if I define a variable outside a function, um, then let's see, we'll call it number of entries, and we're going to define it as 0. Okay. And I don't want to use count because it's just a little generic. So number of entries is what we have. So we're going to find that as 0. Okay. And then every time we add a row, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to increment it. And then when we insert that row into the table, we're going to want to update the contents of that element. So let's come down here to insert into the table. What we want to do is we want to say number of entries plus equals 1. So now what I've done is I've added 1 to it. Remember, plus equal just takes whatever the value is and adds whatever the value is on the left and adds the value on the right. So now that number of entries will go up 1, 2, 3. We can check that before we actually code it into the 72, 185. So if we come down here into the console, we can actually ask for the value of variables. We can say number of entries, and we can see that it's defined as 1. Okay. If I add another one here, I come back and say number of entries is now 2. See this? So these are actually variables. So I can come into the console and I can actually run little JavaScript expressions here. Okay, so now what we want to do is after we've incremented the value, we actually want to insert it into the DOM. So the place we want to insert it into is this table reference called count. Okay, so let's come in here and let's say document.get element by ID dot, that's going to be count dot inner HTML equals number of entries. Okay, so now when we do that, come back here, put in our data. We see that this goes up from 3 to 4 to 5 as we increase that. Okay. All right. Now, let's also so we can get rid of this. Now, also what we need to do is keep track of the average. So here we want the range. I'm just going to keep track of these of the averages of these values. Okay. And actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to swap these two rows because it makes more sense for the average of this column to be underneath that column and the count to be over here. So I'm just going to come back to my index HTML and I'm just going to change the order of those rows. Okay, so now when we insert, okay, and see I'm getting not a number because I didn't enter anything into those text boxes. So we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, all right, so now let's go ahead and do the average. So in order to do the average, what I need is I need to have the sum and the count. So I'm going to define another variable here called sum of entries. And it's going to start at 0. Then whenever I add something into the table, I'm just going to go ahead and say sum of entries plus equal BMI. Okay, so now this is the total of all the BMIs that's been entered. Then I'm going to create the average is going to be the sum of the entries divided by the number of entries. And then I'm going to insert that into my document. And that element is called average right here. And the inner HTML is going to be average. Okay, let's run that and see what it does. Refresh, pick a date, 72, 185. Okay, there's my average. Good. Let's do 125. Up, getting kind of long on the. Okay, so we need to round this again. Okay. And then I think we're good. So let's see. So right here, we'll just do average equals math.round, just like we did on the BMI. Average times 10 divided by 10. So now when we do that, we're always gonna have two decimal positions. Okay, that's good. Rounding to one decimal position rather than not two. And our count is good. Okay, so I think we're good. Now a couple of things do show up here, like what happens if I come in here and I say that I'm 190 inches tall and I weigh 500 pounds? 500 pounds may be true, but 190 inches, that's unlikely to be true. But I'm still getting a value here. So, or if I come in here and I don't enter any data, I'm still getting a value here. Okay. So we need to put in a little error checking here. So let's say the height, we're only going to take people that are between um, um, let's say 36 inches and 8 feet. So 8 feet being what's 96 inches. So let's only take so the value of this text box is we're only going to accept um, we're only going to accept um, values between 36 and 96 in inches. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's come back up here and say up here in our record BMI, this is the button that runs. We're going to do a little if check here. We're going to say if height is less than 36 or height is greater than 96. Okay, if that's the case, then what we're going to do is we're going to say alert invalid height, and we're just going to return so that we're just going to end our. Now this is called a combination statement. So in this case, this is two Boolean expressions. Height less than 36 is going to evaluate to true or false. Height greater than 96 is going to evaluate to true or false. I'm using this symbol called the double pipe. This is an or. So this says if this or this is true, then the whole thing is true. If either one is either one is true, then the whole statement will be true. Okay. So let's go ahead and try that again. So if I come in here and I just record that, I didn't enter a height there. So it says invalid height. If I record 35, invalid height, but 36 is the minimum value. Okay. Still not correct because I need to do the same on weight. So let's just put in another one on weight here and say, let's just pick some arbitrary numbers. If weight, let's say if weight is less than, I don't know, 75 pounds. I'm just picking a number. Or weight is greater than 600 pounds, then let's just not, we're just not going to do the calculation. Spell those correctly. And then we'll just cancel the method. Okay. So now we can do 72. And if we do 35 pounds, then we're going to say that's an invalid weight. If we do 601 pounds, that's an invalid weight. But if I do 150 pounds, okay, then that calculates. We should probably do the same here on the, if I refresh this on the date. So if I come in here and put 72, 185, then I still don't have a date here. So we should probably check here on the date. So let's see. I'm guessing that's going to be a date is blanks. So the way we test for that is we say if date and we use the comparison value. So this is not equal. A single equal is an assignment, remember? So a comparison value, we want to use a strict comparison, which is 3 equal signs. This is a strict comparison. Single equal sign is an assignment. It takes whatever's on the right side of this expression and assigns it to whatever's on the left. The triple equal, double equal, and triple equal are equality checks. There's some nuance between the double and the triple. The triple is generally safer. It looks past things like data types and things like that. So I think if we just say, um, if it's blank, then I'm guessing I think that'll work. I'm not sure if that'll work or not. Let's find out. Okay, so now if we come in here and we say 72, 185, invalid date. All right. Okay, perfect. So now that's what we've done here is called input validation. We've taken data that we can't control that's being entered by the user, and we've put some sanity checks on it so that we can say you really need to be entering data that's in between the ranges. Okay, so I think that's probably got it for what we're trying to do. So now let's review what we've done. We've learned how to do some JavaScript. So we've wired up an event to this record BMI so that when we click it, it runs a method. We did that by using the onClick attribute of the button and giving it the name of a function. We defined that function in our JavaScript, and then we ran some logic. We retrieved the data from each of these inputs using the get element by ID value function and the name of the element that we wanted to retrieve data from. We then did some input validation on them to make sure that they are within range of what our program defines. And then we did some calculations. So we created a function to calculate the BMI based on the height and the weight, where we implemented this formula, and we rounded the value. Then we implemented an if statement to do a range check on the BMI to calculate the description of obese, overweight, healthy, or underweight. And then we inserted it all into the DOM by creating a new table row and inserting that into the table body. Okay. All right. So this will all be posted on Canvas, so you can look at the details if you want to see this. But this covers further manipulation of the DOM, extending the DOM, not just manipulating the existing elements, but actually creating new elements, using the if statements, conditional logic to test for valid inputs, doing input validation, as well as to create new types of data based on the data that the user has entered. So I hope this was helpful, and good luck with your assignment.